just are not. And these things are right under your nose. So the universe is made of atoms. And furthermore, most of the universe is made of hardly any atoms. Most of the universe is either hydrogen or helium. The stuff that's, hydrogen's 97%, helium's not quite 3%. When you look out with a telescope and observe the observable universe. And then the stuff in the middle, everything else, is what I like to call everything else. Barely 1% of the universe. But wait, there's more. When we look out at the stars and the galaxies in distant parts of the universe, they are not slowing down the way you might expect. Big Bang. That's my Big Bang impression. But you know, in space, there's no sound, so you might expect them to slow down by the way ripples might in a pond or something. But no, they're speeding up. And do you know why? Nobody knows why. And 94% of the universe, at least, is that stuff. Whatever that is. Is it dark energy, called dark because you can't see it? Is it dark matter, which has some gravity that's pulling it all apart? Or, you know, in physics, everybody loves particles. You know, there's neutrons and protons and gluons. So I'm thinking darkons. Graviton, darkons, particles of dark. Whatever that is. So I tell you, there is something out there. There is a whole branch of science, a whole study of a separate area of physics that no one knows anything about. And it will change the world in the same way Isaac Newton changed the world. And Albert Einstein changed the world. And in the same way, dare I say it, one of you is going to change the world. And you don't have to get that straight. Why don't we grow plants on buildings? No one's ever really tried it. I look at downtown Atlanta, there might be an opportunity. Be cheerful, you can just reach out your office window or your dorm room and have a tomato, peach, whatever you'd like. No one's ever really tried it. This may turn out to be a crazy idea, a silly idea. But you guys, as taxpayers and voters, are going to have to evaluate this. Here's a collection of ideas for climate change. We'll put a bunch of reflectors out in space and reflect sunlight away from the Earth. Who's going to put them there? Who are you going to convince to pay for them? Oh, it's okay. We'll seed the clouds with these smokestacks on top of boats. Spew them up into the sky and reflect sunlight into space. Okay. Oh, I got it. We're going to throw iron in the ocean and that'll promote the growth of algae. Okay. And then, we'll have airplanes spew sulfur dioxide, just like volcanoes, high in the sky. And maybe it'll rain sulfuric acid. You guys are going to have to figure this out. And I mention this because here's one that I do think is kind of intriguing. This is a lagoon in Belize. It's a picture of a lagoon in Belize. And there's a motorboat. And if you look behind the motorboat, there's a wake that's white, right? Bubbles of white. And those bubbles are reflecting sunlight into space. Okay? Well, it turns out that there's even bubbles that you can't really see unless you're looking very carefully. They're on the order of microns, millions of a meter across, like human hair kind of diameter. And they're so, in certain conditions, they persist for a week. If you have the right kind of seawater that's salty and there's fish poop in it, they stay there a long time. And you have to kind of have an A sample and a B sample to even tell which one has the bubbles in it. It's so subtle sometimes. So these guys, and this one guy in particular, did a study where if you had bubbles, certain diameter, certain concentration, they would reflect light a significant fraction. Maybe farmers' ponds could be kept from evaporating by filling with bubbles. Maybe the reflecting pool at the Washington Monument would have bubbles. The Golden Coat might be a bubble festival. Maybe the world idea is so crazy, it just might work. So I want you guys to figure that out. If you can make the bubble maker, you might get rich. That's all I'm saying. My grandfather went into World War I on a horse. And he put a gas mask on himself and a gas mask on his horse. Because that's the way they did things. That was the state of the war-making art. And when there was a fire on Berkwood Place in Baltimore, Maryland, the fire truck was pulled there by a horse. I mean, yes, you could bring Budweiser, but the fire truck was brought there by a horse. But just consider that 20 years later, 2 decades later, 1938, 1940, whatever you want to call it, nobody did anything like that who was serious about it with a horse. Nobody who was serious about having a war started out with a horse. It wasn't going to happen. Nobody who really wanted to get the fire out used a horse, they drove a truck. And that was just in 2 decades, 20 years. Everything changed. The world changed completely. And I submit that you guys can do the same thing. And those people didn't even have the internet. I know what you're saying. What did they do all day? They couldn't move information around the way you all can. You guys have the ability to change the world. In 1970, as Motown was just emerging, Gil Scott-Heron wrote a song. It was very popular. It was before rap had a name, before rap music had its own category. And the song, the famous song, was "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." The revolution will not be televised because the man will not let it be. The man will control the media. The man, governments will control things. The people will rise up and no one will know about it. It turns out not to be true. It turns out the revolution is being televised. This is a detail. Yeah, the revolution doesn't count. Wait, there's no revolution. I haven't seen any video. There's no revolution. I didn't get a tweet about it. No, it turns out the world is changing because information can move around so fast. And you all are part of it. You are part of this rapid change that will allow us, you in particular, my Rambler Rex, to engineer the future, to legislate the future, to work together to make the world better for everyone. Back on Mars, the Mars dial, sitting there now in the lower left. This is a recent picture. And the Mars dial has the motto, but also around the edge, there's an inscription. And this is the first inscription anybody has ever sent to another world since the 1970s, when they put plaques on the spacecraft as they left the solar system. This is the first message to the future. It says, humans, we built this spacecraft in our year 2003, it arrived here in 2004. Look for signs of water life. Learn about Mars past, prepare for our future, other technical stuff. But then it says, on the last of the 4 edges, it says, to those who visit here, we wish a safe journey and the joy of discovery. And that, my friends, is what this is all about. That is what science is all about, is the joy of discovery. This is what's going to allow you to find out about this new physics, to discover this new science, to create these new technologies, and change the world. Now, I have, since the days of the Science Guy Show, taken a day job. I'm now the executive director of the Planetary Society, and we are building our own little spacecraft to be pushed through space with nothing but photons. What? Yes, photons. And this is a consequence of relativity. Relativity allows light to have momentum even though it has no mass. Oh, dude, that is like so out there. Yeah. It's cool. We're building it just kind of for kicks by enthusiasts around the world. And this will be, it's so shiny. How shiny is it? It's about as big as this stage when it's deployed, and you'll be able to see it with your naked eye. No trouble. So, the very first college chapter of the Planetary Society is right here at Georgia Tech. is scheduled now to leave on Friday the 29th of April. And the Planetary Society has arranged to put some little organisms in there. Some happy little microbes. And the water bears, if you know the water bears, these are these little organisms that you can see with, sometimes with just your naked eye, but if you have a hand lens, a little magnifier. They're the cutest. Just to give you a plug, if you participate in our living interplanetary flight experiment, Life, we'll send you a plush toy water bear. Water bear. Anyway, then we're going to send this titanium module, this hockey puck, to Phobos, the moon of Mars and back, in November. You can only go to Mars every 22 months. And November is the next opportunity, next launch opportunity. And we're going to try this to see if living things can travel from Mars to the Earth. This is an old idea called the transpermia hypothesis, life going across interplanetary space. It may turn out, it is not crazy beyond craziness to suggest that life started on Mars, got shot into space by this big impactor about 3 billion years ago, a big rock hit Mars, and came to the Earth. And you and I really, deep down, are all Martians. I'm not saying that's what happened. It's just possible. It's not crazy. We're going to try it. So consider the Planetary Society if you get around to it. I went down to Cape Canaveral for a rocket launch. This is a picture of the Earth and the Moon, taken from a high-rise camera on Mars Global Surveyor spacecraft, and on its way to Mars. And the astronauts who went there to the Moon took about 3 days, 2.5 days to get there, and a half day to slow down, because you don't want to miss. If you miss the Moon, well, what's up? I went there for New Horizons. And New Horizons is the fastest rocket anybody's ever shot so far. It went past the Moon, not in 3 days, but in 9 hours. 9 hours. Going that fast, New Horizons, which launched going on 5 years ago, will arrive in the vicinity of Pluto with a little gravity assist from Jupiter, a little from Jupiter. It will arrive in the vicinity of Pluto in 2015. 2015. So I just want you guys all to stop and think when 2015 comes around and we see these astonishing pictures of Pluto. Yes, Uncle Bill was there back at Georgia Tech. I was an undergraduate. He went on about, I don't know what it was, changing glasses, something with cars, I don't know what that was all about. But that's right, he was talking about that. Just try to remember what's going on now while you're in school, 2011, and in 4 years, is anything different? Have we taken a substantial fraction of that 2-decade thing that my grandfather lived through? Have we done anything? Have there been any significant changes that you can notice? And then compare it to what you're doing now to what you want to be doing in 4 years and what you are really doing when you get there in 4 years. This is a picture taken by the Cassini spacecraft, named after the guy who discovered the rings or documented the rings on Saturn. And it's an astonishing photograph. They got the spacecraft out beyond the orbit of Saturn, pointed it back toward the sun, got the sun just glinting, hinting around the lower left there of the planet. The shadow of the rings on the planet. The rings are lit up by sunlight. It's astonishing. By the way, if you had a bathtub big enough, Saturn would float. But that would be an extraordinary bathtub. It's interesting. But this picture is also a picture of the Earth. The Earth is right there. It's it. It's that dot behind the rings. So if we went out a couple thousand kilometers that way, the Earth would be here against those enhanced background stars. That's it. That's everybody. That's That's the whole thing. That's all 7 billion. What's 3 billion? All the sea jellies, this giant squid. The problem with squid are going to do very well. They big climate change. Cockroaches. It's going to be a party. But I think back on this. When I was in 3rd grade, Mrs. Cochran, my 3rd grade teacher, told us that there are more stars in the sky than there are grains of sand on the beach. And I remember thinking, I wouldn't have said it quite this way. But I remember thinking, Mrs. Cochran, are you high? Have you ever been to a beach lately? There was a lot of sand. There is sand. I was in Delaware at this time. You go that way, 1,000 miles, 1,000 nautical miles, it's just sand. You look behind you, there's sand. It turns out there's more sand. You shuffle your feet and there is sand. Sand, sand, sand. But there are apparently more stars in creation than all of that. All of those stars. And little old me, I'm standing on this beach, and I'm thinking, I am hardly different from a grain of sand. They're just little specks. I am just another speck. If you go out in the ocean far enough, just a few 17 nautical miles, you don't see the land. You're in the middle of oceanic nowhere, the trackless sea. I am a speck, standing on a speck, the Earth, which is orbiting the sun, a completely unremarkable star, nothing special about the sun. So I'm a speck on a speck, orbiting a speck, in the middle of specklessness. I suck. I am nothing. But with my brain, which is this big. In the case of my old boss, but with your brain, which is just this big, you can know and appreciate all of that. You can know your place in space. You can ponder your speckiness. You can, dare I say it, change the world! Thank you all very much.
I got a question.
He's got a question here in the front. There'll be a microphone. My understanding is there will not be 2 turntables. But there will be a microphone. Sure, you're first.
Sweets. Just want to thank you for coming down here. I really do appreciate you so much. You may not realize it, but you're a hero to a lot of the fellow nerds and geeks that are here right now.
It's not Georgia liberal arts. What is any wrong with that?
So I wanted to ask you, not too recently, they actually eliminated Pluto as a planet, and then there was a debacle where they brought it back again. I don't know if you had an opinion on that. I'd like to hear what you thought.
Well, I have an opinion, but wait, there's more.
Oh.
I'm going to cheer you up. I claim I'm going to cheer you up. If you had Pluto next to the moon, the Earth's moon, it's much smaller than the Earth's moon. Okay. I mean, that's not a deal breaker, but it is a little orange and yellow. It's smaller than the moon. Wait, if you took Pluto to where the moon is, it would evaporate. After a few centuries, it would just go away. Furthermore, it barely has enough gravity to keep its own moon, which is almost as big as it is. So, what was the last of the traditional planets is now the first of a whole new class of objects that I like to call the Plutoids. Come on, Plutoids, that's cool. Yeah, I was just a big planet, but now I'm a Plutoid. It's scary. You should step back. Plutoids. And it turns out there's thousands of Plutoids. And there's people, my colleagues, who say the moon should be its own planet. Saturn should be, the moons of Saturn should be planets, the moons of Jupiter should be planets. And end up with hundreds of planets. Okay. But for me, the expression traditional planet, I mean, we know what we're talking about. You got your Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. I'm happy with that. If you want to get in a fist fight in the planetary bar, I like the 8 traditional planets and the Plutoids. That's frozen. That's a very good question. Thank you.
Thanks. You're my hero, man.
You're a scientifically literate society, you want an honor of sending people to Mars. That's what I mean. It sounds crazy, but that's what I want to do. Because what our very best robots do in about a week, our very best robots driven by our very best robot drivers, what they do in a week, a human geologist does in about a minute. So it's about 10,000 to 1. So if you could get some place on Mars that is especially interesting, and to me, that place would be some slushy outcropping near the equator on a summer day where there might be fossil microbes or Mars crobes. Maybe there'd still be some alive. And if you found living things on that world, I'm telling you, it would change this world. It would change the world. So that's what I'd like to do, but it has to be done in an economically reasonable way, with stepping stones, and everybody's got to agree it's worth doing. But it's a long way off. Closing or shutting down the space shuttle program, in my opinion, is the right thing to do. It's an old spacecraft, it's dangerous. It costs $500 million US to fly them. I know it doesn't go as far as it used to, but $500 million is a lot of money. Thank you, that's a great question. I did not know that.
Hey, so when you were making your show, you were really on the cutting edge of kind of revolutionizing how TV could be used as an educational media for reaching people and getting them to something they want to change the world. So, what are some? So, do you have any tips for anyone out here that wants to be using things like maybe the App Store that people really haven't even scratched the surface of how that can be used to reach people in the educational setting?
You're talking about using the internet to assess?
Yeah, just anything like that. Like if somebody out here wants to get like a startup company going or something like that.
Here's what I want somebody to do. A very compelling recent study was that the thing that determines whether or not you grow up to be a scientist or engineer, not whether or not you become scientifically literate as a voter, which I think is vital, not as an aside, but as supporting evidence. We have a society increasingly dependent on technology.